Hi, this is Dave from the Flowood High School Industrial Arts Program, and today we're going to talk about joiner safety. Joiner is a great tool to have in your shop, and it's nice for us. We get a lot of lumber from local sawmills, so it comes to the shop rough sawn, so we don't have any straight edges. Even when you buy lumber at a lumber store, a lot of times your boards are going to have crowns, they're going to have bows, they're going to have cups, they're going to have numerous things, and you can fix those problems to straighten your boards using the joiner. When you're using a joiner, you got to think safety right away. You open it up, it has this guard, and the guard is spring loaded. You have to make sure that this guard always retracts back. Sometimes it doesn't retract back and there's a nut underneath that might need to be adjusted. Making sure that guard is always retracting back, covering the blade. On our joiner, we have 3 blades, and those blades, they're on a cylinder and they pivot clockwise. So they're going, if you're facing the joiner, those blades are pivoting clockwise, and this is a tool that you can literally bring your fingers across and it'll turn your fingers into hamburger if you're not careful. So you really have to respect this piece of equipment. You need to make sure that you have nothing dangling so that it can't get caught into the blades. Make sure you don't have any loose clothing. Make sure you're always wearing safety glasses. This is a loud machine. Make sure you have earplugs in. Be aware of everybody around you. If you're jointing longer boards, make sure that you are able to handle that board so that you are in control of the board while you're using it. If you're able to cut the board into shorter pieces, cut it into shorter pieces before you start to joint and straighten one edge. When you're using the joiner, one thing you have to think about is your grain. The grain on here is fairly straight. I'm not sure if you can even see the grain, but it's fairly straight. But if you think about the joiner, the blades are turning clockwise. And you have to look at where the grain, the high point and the enter and the exit point. If you watch these grains here, they start high here, and if you follow the grains across, they exit on the other side. And so when you're cutting with the joiner and that blade is spinning around, you want where the grain exits the piece of wood, you want that to be on the back side. Where it's on the high, where it enters, that's where you want to start feeding it. So that way it doesn't chip your board. So always be aware, some boards are hard to tell. Some boards, some of the ash we have here has pretty sporadic grains in it, and so it's a little bit harder to do. It'll start and stop on both, start and exit on both sides of your board, so it's a little bit tougher. Pine, they're usually pretty simple. Oak is pretty simple, but there are some woods that are a little bit harder to tell. You can also, when you're running a board through here, one of the key things is making sure, and people will tell you different. If you have a board that has you look down the edge of the board and see which way is straight, if you got a crown in it one way or the other. I tell people, and this is where you get different opinions, I tell people you put the board on the joiner so it looks like it's smiling. I was taught that at a young age. That's how you join, especially when you're doing longer boards. If you have shorter boards that fit on this short length of the fence, then you could do it the other way, where it looks like it's a sad face. But I'll tell you, my opinion, you always put it so it looks like the board is smiling. And when you start with the board, look at it, put the smiley face up, and you start, let's say this is a longer board. You start with the board sitting on the fence, make sure it's behind the guard. I start here holding my hand here, right at the end of the fence, and I start feeding the board through. Making sure that my fingers aren't dangling down to hit the guard. My fingers should never come below the guard. I keep my thumb wrapped on the top and my other hand pushed up against. These fingers keep it tight against the fence. My right hand is the one that's doing the pushing. My left hand is holding the pressure down. So I'm going to start here, hold pressure on this end, hold it tight against the fence, push it through. Once I get to this side of the fence, now my left hand is never going to come onto the right side of the blades again. It's going to keep going through. And if I get to a point and the board's longer, I slide one hand back at a time. First my left hand, still holding pressure, keeping it on the left side of the blades, and then my right hand. Okay? So you're pushing the board through, slide left hand back, then your right hand, and keep pushing it through. And if you do that, you're always holding pressure on the left side, you're going to start to create, even if you have a huge smile, you're going to start to create a flat spot. And that flat spot is going to begin to get longer all the way through. But like I said, you got to be aware of where the blade is. You start getting smaller boards coming across. Now, it's a little harder. I have my hands down like that. So I got to be a little bit more careful. I might move my hand, go across to the other side. One of the things that can be dangerous, a lot of times you'll use your thumb on the back side of the board to push it through. If you start getting narrower boards, that thumb starts to get closer to those blades. You can use a push stick. When it gets anywhere below the height of this fence, you can start using a push stick. And I didn't bring one over here at the moment for that, but you can use a push stick to feed it through so that your fingers aren't in the way. One push stick I did bring over, because you can also, if you have a board, rough sawn board, like this one, you know, it's a rough sawn, you can run this, I have to move the fence for it, but you can run this through the joiner on one of the faces to get the face flat. So once we get a face flat, you can use a push stick like this. It's got a little clip on the end, push it all the way through, and you're going to get one flat surface. After you get one flat surface, then you can take it over to the surface planer and plane down the other side. But again, the key thing is make sure you're aware of where the blade is. Make sure that this guard is in place. Make sure that you're using the dust collector at all times. If you're noticing that chips keep flying out, that means the dust collector either isn't on or something got plugged. If something got plugged, make sure you unplug it, shut it off, unplug it, the cord, and then check out, see what happened. Because it should take most of the debris away so you don't have any chunks. Another thing to watch when you're bringing these boards through, you're going to have some chips that are going to come back here. Make sure you keep that clear as you're pushing the board through so you aren't sitting your piece on top of those chips. It should always be sitting flat on the bed. Feed it through, and we'll run it through here one time. I'll turn it on. I'm not going to start the dust collector because it's loud, but we'll run one through. Remember, here's looking at the grain. Here's where it starts. Here's where it exits, so that's the way I'm going to run it through. Oops, I unplugged it, so I gotta reset it. Pressure down and against the fence. And I'm always going to make sure I'm positioned correctly. I'm going to start on the left-hand side. Most of the time I'm going to be here until more of the board gets over here, and then I might pivot myself across. But again, you got to make sure nothing is dangling, nothing you get caught in the blade. Respect this tool. It's a great tool. You can do numerous things with it, but you got to respect it. Make sure you're aware of what it can do. Your biggest thing, make sure this guard is working. Make sure your fingers never go below that. Ideally, keep your fingers no lower than this fence when you're coming across anywhere inside this guard. You should keep your fingers no lower than this fence. But beyond that, that's the pretty basics of a joiner. So I hope that helps.